Welcome, artists! We are working on our Pirate Week, and so we are going to be creating a drawing of hidden treasure under the sea. To start my drawing, I started by drawing 5 loops from one side of my paper to the other, a continuous line. For your paper, it kind of depends on what size of paper you have. I have a larger piece of paper, so I did 5. You might want to do 3. It all depends on what you have. After creating those loops with my line, I'm starting to create sea creatures inside of those loops. I'm going to demonstrate 5 different sea creatures, but you don't have to do the sea creatures I'm drawing. You can design whatever sea creatures you want to create. Once I'm done drawing the details on my sea creature, I'm going to start coloring them with crayons. Now again, use whatever you have on hand. I'm going to use crayons because that's what I have. So with my crayons, you can see I colored a little darker on one side and lighter on the other side. This is called value, when it's darker on one side and lighter on the other side. We use this to make the drawing pop out a little bit and look 3D and not as flat. You'll also notice that I'm starting to use other colors of red over top. Right now I'm using a reddish orangish color, and in person when you're looking at the drawing you can see all those different colors blended together to make my own new color. I skipped ahead and finished my coloring, and now I'm going to add my treasure chest at the bottom of my picture and the ocean floor. So you'll see here I'm adding details on my treasure chest. I'm drawing it in a way that makes the treasure chest look 3-dimensional too, and makes it look like it's popping off the page. When I'm finished with my crayons and blending different colors together to create new colors, I'm going to be using 3 different watercolor techniques. The first technique is using a white crayon. This is called a watercolor resist technique. So crayon resist technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw with a white crayon and then I'm going to paint on top of it. What happens is the watercolor and the crayon, they don't like each other. And so the crayon doesn't let the watercolor sit on top of it. So I'm drawing the white lines all over and then I will start to paint my blue water on top of it. While I'm painting, you'll notice that some areas have a darker blue than others. How I do that technique is I use more water and that makes a lighter blue, and when I use more paint, it makes a darker blue. So there's another bonus technique I didn't even think about. While I'm painting, I'm trying to paint around my bubbles in my eyes, but sometimes I go over top of it, and that's okay. That's the cool thing about watercolor paint, is that it kind of blends and bleeds everywhere, and that's all right. That's how you get that really unique look from that type of medium. You all know how much I love mixing and making my own colors, so that step is up next. I'm cleaning my brush and now I'm going to be starting to add some yellows and greens into my painting to make the water have a bluish greenish look and not just be a plain blue. So I'm mixing other colors into my water to make it more interesting. Our next watercolor technique I'm using is adding the salt. If you sprinkle salt over wet watercolor paint, it leaves these really cool marks once it dries. So all I'm doing is sprinkling the salt onto the wet areas, and you have to make sure it's still wet, otherwise it won't work. So you can always add water back onto it too before you add the salt too in certain areas. So then once my whole piece is dry, I'll brush off the salt and you'll get to see what the salt does to your painting. The next watercolor technique is to add some rubbing alcohol if you have it. And again, if you don't have any salt or rubbing alcohol or any of these materials, don't worry. Even if you don't have watercolor paint, just color it with crayons. Use what you have at home. I hope you enjoy this project.